pirates were really born, not the way movies show it. You are without doubt the worst pirate I've ever heard of. But you have heard of me. That line works for a reason, because pirates are one of the few historical groups everyone thinks they understand, yet almost nobody actually does. Ask someone to picture a pirate, and the image appears instantly. An eye patch, a wooden leg, a parrot, rum sloshing in a cup, a black flag snapping in the wind, and a treasure chest buried under palm trees. It's familiar, comfortable, almost cartoonish. But here's the problem. Almost everything in that image is wrong, or at least dangerously misleading. Real pirates didn't spend most of their lives drinking rum and singing shanties. They didn't sail under skull flags all day. They didn't randomly attack ships for fun. And most of them didn't die rich, legendary, or even remembered. So who were they really? Where did pirates actually come from? Why did so many ordinary sailors suddenly turn into violent outlaws? And how did piracy go from a government-approved profession to a crime punishable by slow death? To answer that, we need to go back to a moment when the world suddenly became much bigger and much bloodier.
Why the Caribbean became a pirate magnet? Pirates didn't appear out of nowhere. They were created by empires. After Christopher Columbus reached the Americas, Europe entered a colonial gold rush. The rules were simple. Whoever got there first owned everything, and Spain got there first. For a while, Spain controlled almost all of the New World, and that control made it unimaginably rich. Silver from Peru, gold from Mexico, sugar, tobacco, exotic goods, and enslaved people moving across the Atlantic in endless convoys. Entire fleets, later called the Spanish Silver Fleet, crossed the Caribbean carrying wealth on a scale Europe had never seen before. And where there's concentrated wealth moving through narrow sea lanes, predators appear. At the same time, life aboard a legal ship was brutal. Merchant sailors were underpaid, overworked, and easily replaced. Naval sailors had it even worse: forced service, brutal discipline, and almost no chance of advancement. So young men did the math. Serve for years, maybe die and stay poor forever, or take a massive risk, break the law, and possibly become rich in a few years. Most chose the risk. That's why adventurers, criminals, deserters, escaped slaves, and exiles flooded into the Caribbean. The geography helped too. Thousands of islands, hidden coves, shallow waters, competing colonial powers, and a sea so vast Spain could never fully police it. Piracy wasn't just tempting. In the Caribbean, it was almost inevitable.
The Golden Age begins. Tortuga and Port Royal. Piracy didn't become an organized force overnight, but once governments realized pirates could be useful, everything changed. In 1625, pirates backed by France seized the island of St. Kitts. 5 years later, they took Tortuga, a tiny island that would become legendary. The English followed suit in 1655, capturing Jamaica from Spain and transforming the port of Port Royal into a pirate capital. This moment marks what historians now call the Golden Age of Piracy. But Here's the twist most movies ignore. Not all pirates were criminals. In fact, many were officially employed.
Pirates, Corsairs, and legalized theft. Words matter here. A pirate was an outlaw. No nation protected him. If caught, he faced execution, usually hanging. A corsair, privateer, or capper, however, was something else entirely. These men carried government-issued licenses called letters of marque, allowing them to attack enemy ships legally during wartime. They had rules, paperwork, and even courts that validated their loot. Same violence, same ships, same bloodshed, but with legal protection. This created a massive gray zone. Wars ended slowly, news traveled even slower, and many captains conveniently claimed they hadn't heard that peace had been declared. Which brings us to one man who mastered this ambiguity better than anyone.
Henry Morgan and the art of not asking permission. Henry Morgan began as a poor laborer. He ended as one of the most powerful men in the Caribbean. In 1671, after England and Spain had signed a peace treaty, Morgan led a massive raid on Panama, one of Spain's most important cities. He knew exactly what he was doing. The letter announcing peace reached him while he was already sailing. Turning back would mean abandoning a fortune, so Morgan continued, sacked the city, tortured prisoners for hidden wealth, and escaped with enormous treasure. Back in England, he didn't face execution. He faced judges. Judges he bribed. Morgan returned to the Caribbean not as a criminal, but as lieutenant governor of Jamaica. On the high seas, there was an unspoken rule. Beyond a certain line, there was no peace. What happened at sea stayed at sea, as long as there were no witnesses. Who actually became pirates? Pirates were not romantic rebels or noble outcasts. They were mostly young men with nothing to lose. English and French sailors made up the majority, with Dutch not far behind. But pirate crews were surprisingly diverse. Italians, Swedes, Portuguese, Africans, including escaped slaves, all sailed together. Class mattered too. Aristocrats were rare. Educated men were rare. Stede Bonnet, a wealthy landowner who joined piracy out of boredom and kept a library on board, was considered a bizarre exception. Most pirates were former criminals, deserters, or forced laborers. Morgan himself started at the very bottom. Piracy wasn't freedom, it was a gamble.
Women, violence, and the reality behind the myth. Women were almost never allowed aboard pirate ships, not because of superstition, but because competition over women led to knife fights and mutiny. There are only two well-documented female pirates, Anne Bonny and Mary Read. They sailed disguised as men, fought viciously, and reportedly encouraged the execution of witnesses. Both were sentenced to hang and saved only by claiming pregnancy. On land, women played a different role.
On Tortuga, the governor famously imported women from France, criminals and prostitutes, and auctioned them as wives. Brutal by modern standards, but for many women it meant legal status, protection, and a better life than prison or starvation. Pirate society wasn't moral, it was pragmatic. Life aboard a pirate ship. Living on a pirate ship was miserable. Ships were small, overcrowded, filthy. Water spoiled quickly. Bathing meant rain. Toilets meant leaning over the side. They avoided heavy cannons. Sinking a target destroyed the prize. Instead, they packed ships with men. Overwhelming numbers won battles. Entertainment was limited. Drinking, gambling, music. Musicians were sometimes captured just to keep morale up, even during combat. And yet, compared to merchant or naval ships, piracy felt fair.
Pirate democracy and the code. Pirate ships were surprisingly democratic. Captains were elected, loot was shared, discipline was strict but agreed upon. One of the most famous pirate codes belonged to Bartholomew Roberts. He allowed drinking, banned gambling, set punishments, and established compensation for injuries. Lose a hand? Paid. Lose a leg? Paid more. This mattered because amputations were common. Surgeons were respected. Without one, a carpenter performed surgery using saws and axes. Wooden legs, eye patches, those weren't myths, they were standard equipment. How pirates really fought. Pirates avoided naval battles. Cannons were risky. Instead, they relied on speed, surprise, and terror. The black flag was raised only at the last moment, a final psychological weapon. After capture came torture, not always out of cruelty, but efficiency. Hidden valuables had to be found quickly. Cities were ransomed, refused to pay, and pirates burned them. Piracy wasn't chaotic, it was systematic. How big was piracy really? Despite their fame, pirates were never that numerous. At any given time, only 2,000 to 4,000 pirates operated in the Caribbean. Henry Morgan's Panama raid, 1,800 men, was the largest ever. Most pirates died within 3 years. Those who survived usually drank their wealth away. The real money was made by tavern owners, smugglers, and brothel keepers. For every legendary pirate, there were thousands who vanished without a grave. The end. Nassau and the death of an era. By the early 18th century, piracy had become inconvenient. Empires stabilized, trade routes hardened, navies grew stronger. Pirates only survived in gray zones like Nassau, a lawless port in the Bahamas that functioned as a pirate republic for 12 years. Eventually, war ended in Europe. Navies were freed. An offer was made: amnesty or the noose. Many refused. Blackbeard was killed. Bartholomew Roberts died in battle. Hundreds were hanged. Piracy didn't fade away, it was crushed. What pirates really were. Pirates were not freedom-loving rebels. They were not heroes. They were not idiots chasing rum and parrots. They were a product of empire, war, inequality, and opportunity. For a brief moment, the world was chaotic enough for them to thrive. Then order returned, and pirates disappeared, leaving behind legends far cleaner than the truth.